Hey programmers! Today on grandMA3 for grandMA2 programmers, we're exploring groups and grid selections. Groups are our old buddies that we know and love, and grids are a part of groups. A grid might look at first glance to be a bit like a layout, but they definitely are not layouts. First, let's talk about what's old and what's new in groups. This is easy because groups still do everything that they did in MA2 plus a bit more. There's still a selection of any number of fixtures. Remember, selection order is still everything. And all of our new selection syntax that we learned in the last video for selecting parent and subfixtures will be remembered when we store a group. To make a new group, you still select your units, maybe in the fixture sheet or the stage view or the layout, then press store and touch a group tile like MA2, or just long press on the tile to store it and give it a name. Anytime you go to store fixtures to an existing group, the pop-up will still offer tools like merge, remove, and overwrite. The new option here is a grid merge mode, which we're going to come back to when we look at grids. Now, let's hit up a couple of new options for groups that we only get in grandMA3. If I go into the edit options of this new group, I can add an appearance or a scribble. I can also choose to edit it and open the selection in an editor to make changes. And there's also now options that relate to group masters. We can still assign a group to a fader and inhibit it that way, but now here in the edit options for this group, if I turn on a mode like negative, I can inhibit this group right here in this window with the master on the right. The level will also show up in the group tile, which I really like. Groups, easy and intuitive. Now let's talk about grids. If you've ever made a group or any sort of fixture selection, then you've already technically laid out a basic grid. You just may not have known it. Fixture placement on a grid is always happening whenever you're working with fixtures. Let's open the window called the selection grid. Right away, we can see the x-axis and the tile numbering running horizontally and the y-axis numbering running vertically. It's not immediately obvious, but there's also a z-axis that stacks on top of what we're looking at here. There is no grid pool, but the information you create here can be stored as a group in the group pool. Every group has a fixture grid associated with it, and by default, if you don't make a specific grid for them, the units in the group will show up in a straight line across the x-axis of the grid, like this spots group. In fact, anytime you make a fixture selection, whether you're typing it in, lassoing it, whatever, it will show up visually in the selection grid window as a straight line across the x-axis, whether you're looking at this window or not. The exception to the default x-axis layout is when you're working with parent and child fixtures, like a grouping fixture and a parent fixture and a subfixture. If I grab my x4 bar parent fixtures, they lay out horizontally on the x-axis. When I hit down to select my fixture's parent fixtures, they start populating on the y-axis. And if I go down again to my subfixtures, well, they're stacking on the z-axis. These are just defaults. The idea with grids is that you could set up your fixtures in the grid any way that you like. For example, this LED tiles group is a grid that lays out the units as if we were looking at them on stage. This rig group lays out most of the demo rig as a combination of a front view of the LED cells and a top-down view of our movers. You can set your grids up however you like. Grids aren't layouts, even though they kind of look like them. So since we already have layouts as an option, why bother setting up your selection in a grid as well? Basically, these grids come into play anytime that you're aligning things, whether you're aligning values or doing a fan timing or working with phasers. The console will do the alignment math along the x-axis based on how you've laid out your fixtures in the grid. That explanation itself probably doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just easier if I show you. Let's take a look at that LED tile group again. I'm setting them to full, and then let's say I want to delay the timing of their intensity. I'm setting a delay time of 0 through 5, and look what we get. The first column on the x-axis goes to full, and then the second, and so on. Without this grid layout, if I had selected the same fixtures by their numbers and delayed out the intensity from 0 to 5, we would have seen each cell turn on one at a time instead of columns of cells. The same idea works if I wanted to vary the intensity across this wall. I'm turning off that intensity and this time setting my selection to 0 through full. I'm not even messing with timing at this point, just spreading out intensity levels across my LEDs. Or maybe I want to be aligning color in a different mode of align. The alignment is all being done over my x-axis. And that's something important to notice because right now in the software, we can only align on the x-axis, but in future versions, you'll be able to align on y and z as well. This time, let's make our own grid selection. First, let's see how to navigate the window. We can zoom in and out and also rotate when we press and drag. This will be useful when we start working with the z-axis. In the top menu, far right is Zoom to Fit. Next to that is an option to turn our grid background on or off. The Auto Remove X Gaps will essentially eliminate any blank grid spaces on the x-axis between fixtures and scoot them all towards the left. It will also affect us when we're trying to place lights in the grid, so for now, I want to leave this off. And the options in the Windows settings are not exactly intimidating. You can set an appearance or load or save a preference. We're ready to drop some units into our grid. There's a couple of ways we can do this. First is by using this blue cursor, which I can move around by just touching on the screen. Then when I select a fixture, he'll be dropped where that blue cursor was, and then the cursor immediately moves one cell to the right. So the next unit I type in would go just to the right of my first unit. If I don't want that next unit there, I can touch on the screen to place the cursor somewhere else and then select my next unit. And this is how I could easily allow for some negative space in between my fixtures. If you've ever put dummy fixtures into your grandMA2 show file so that the alignment math would work when you were working with groups of different quantities of lights, then I think you're going to be pretty happy with grids. Like if you had a truss of 10 fixtures and then a second truss with less than 10 fixtures, you can just set them up on the grid with some empty tiles serving as negative space so that when you align, the console will just do the math. Another way you can drop fixtures into a grid is by using the command line. I can use the new grid key, which is available on the consoles by holding MA and pressing X3. With the grid key, I can specify a single point to place the cursor, like typing grid 0/5, please. That left me at 0 on the x-axis and 5 on the y-axis. I can also set a range like grid 1/0 through 5/0, please. Then if I select 5 fixtures, they go right there. But what if I cleared out, then made that same grid selection of grid 1/0 through 5/0, and then selected 10 fixtures instead of 5? The last 5 fixtures get stacked above the first 5, one level up on the z-axis. And if you just want your whole selection to stack on the z-axis, you can add a third variable to your grid keyword, something like grid 0/0/1 through 0/0/5, please. I've been keying in the fixture numbers of all of my selections to make these grids. If you're setting up a range for your cursor, it's important that you don't then make a fixture selection by touching one of the existing groups, because those groups already have a grid associated with them and you'll lose your cursor setup. Let's try to remake that LED tile grid that we saw earlier, and let's use the grid key to do it. There's 100 tiles, and we want 10 rows of 10 fixtures each. So I'm keying in grid 0/0 through 9/9, please. That gives me my big blue box with 100 tiles. Now I'm just selecting the LED cells in order by typing in 201 through 300, please. And there they are, in order. When you've got your grid how you like it, you probably want to store it. They get stored into the groups pool because it's a selection tool. And if you need to merge fixtures to your group later on, you have a choice to either have this new selection show up in the grid just to the right of the existing grid on the x-axis with the Append X mode. Or it can just start wherever it starts if you choose off, which means that your original grid and your merged fixtures may overlap. If you're not sure, go with Append X. And this whole grid system with its X, Y, and Z axes are going to come into play when you're working with a matrix, which we're talking about next. See you soon.